Dynasty quarterback rankings, end of 2023, really the beginning of the chapter that is the 2024 early offseason. We're ranking the quarterbacks that are in the NFL, as well as taking into account the rookies that are going to make and leave quite a mark, I feel, right around the corner. And all we can do is anticipate that. And that's what the theme of these rankings are, guys. Let me really make it clear. First off, this channel is not and won't be this analytical. I don't have a model to churn out this hard, fast, empirical process, and in terms of how I'm ranking these guys. What I am applying here is what in other words, maybe classify a model of the 4 Ps: projection versus production. What we think might happen now that, look, only a handful of teams are playing football right now. A lot of us are out of the playoffs, so all we can do is, at this point, project moving forward. But of course, take into account the production and what they've done in the NFL. And then really the theme of projection, based on obviously the production that they've shown, either in the NFL or in college, as a handful of these guys that are going to be in this video. And then really weighing the other 2 Ps are perception versus perspective. The perception, the pervading thoughts, feelings, the general mood that people have, the impressions that these players have left on our minds, how we maybe feel about them, but also then the perspective. Ultimately, we have to make sense. The theme of these tiered ranking videos, we're making sense of who's around them. What are their peers doing? What have they put on the field? What do we think they might put on the field? So that's the conundrum, guys. It's ultimately my opinion. Let me know your top 5 quarterbacks, your top 20, however bad you think my rankings are. But with that being said, we're on the road to 50 subs, and I cannot thank you guys enough. It only motivates me to further fulfill my promise, deliver quality fantasy football content to you all. Let's get into these rankings. Getting into this, guys. In my tier list, we know SA, all the letters. For a lack of confusion, I'm just going to number it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Starting off with the number 1 tier. Jumping into it, I got 3 guys. Who these 3 are, I think that's pretty clear at this point. It's going to be Mr. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Pat Mahomes. These guys, look, we talk about the 4P model I mentioned. Production, projection, perspective, perception. These guys tick off all the boxes. So fit, highly productive. Put it in front of us. So highly thought of. Value, the term everyone loves to use in this space. Value, insulation. They're not going to go down in value anytime soon. I do have Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts at the top of this tier because of the fact I'm always going to inherently lean where there's some rushing upside. I think both of those guys in Allen and Hurts have shown that. Allen is just constantly now, a couple years running. He's QB1. He's putting the production out there. He's looking better now with Joe Brady, the guy who was at the helm of Joe Burrow's LSU record-breaking season as his OC right now. He's cooking. I put my faith ultimately into these 3 guys more than anyone. And am I being too harsh on Pat Mahomes here? I don't think so. We know how good he is. He is the best true talent at the quarterback position in the NFL, but we play fantasy football, and that's something that I think we can easily lose sight of. His perception is so high, right? And rightfully so. But I think maybe we get a little bit caught up in him as this Dynasty quarterback 1 for so long. He's in the top tier. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to make that cast any doubt in that sense. It's just the reality is, look, he's had a tough year. No Tyreek Hill anymore. Kelsey's getting up there. Rashee Rice, great to see him kind of round into form. And I think, look, it's going to get better. The receivers, hopefully next year, don't follow up a league-leading drop rate. But Nonetheless, guys, the reality of this tier one is it is a tier. And that's the theme of this, how we all crave to make sense of any position in Dynasty. We want these two-dimensional rankings where there's this inherent vertical hierarchy of a tier, but ultimately we like to place and make sense of things in terms of who's in what bucket. And this is my bucket of tier one Dynasty quarterback rankings. Who's in tier two now? Well, tier two, there are some really great options and guys that, look, could very well get into tier one. I want to make it clear too. All rankings, as people, we have to be adaptable and flexible over time. We can't just be so stuck in our ways. And let me make that so clear. These are my thoughts at this point in time. They're subject to change, guys. But with that being said, I'm going out there, going off on a ledge with these rankings, and that is the case with tier two. Tier two, we have about 6 guys there. Who exactly? Well, I think it's clear who some of them are, but maybe not so clear who some others are. CJ Stroud is at the top of this tier for me. I'm a little bit biased. Talk about how bias plays into all of us, whether we'd like to admit it or not, or maybe see it or don't. CJ Stroud for me, look, he's putting up, when he's been healthy out there, he's putting up top 5 statistical numbers at the position. Fantasy, real life. He is an incredible talent, basically in the mold of the guy that's right next to him in a Joe Burrow, a pocket presence, really dominator within the pocket, can just completely surgically dice up any defense. Not fazed by anything, can work through his reads, finds his receivers, which, look, the reality is he doesn't have his Jamar Chase or even his T. Higgins, as Joe Burrow does. CJ Stroud is really he's been kind of my dynasty darling. I picked him at the 102 in my home league rookie draft before the NFL draft even happened as the QB1 in the class. I've picked him in a handful of other of my leagues. I'm realizing some gains, and we all love some CJ Stroud. I don't have to ramble on. He's put on a historic rookie season, and rightfully so. He deserves to be my quarterback 4. Quarterback 5, look, we talked about with Burrow. It's tough with the injury, but when he's out there, he can put up numbers. There's just a peace of mind in when he's on the field. Ultimately, he's a guy that you trust to get you 20 points, give or take, right? You just have your trust in Joe Burrow. Need I digress? Lamar, equally. Look, we talk about rushing upside. You could, again, the point of a tier, it is really horizontally, if you're in the same tier, I don't fault you for ranking it however which way maybe you prefer. But for me, with Lamar, it's no slouch at number as the QB6. There are several really incredible quarterbacks. And that's the beauty. We need 2 of them in our leagues, more likely than not. We play in Superflex leagues. And I got to put Lamar as my quarterback 6. He has just unbelievable ability on the ground, but through the air. Ultimately, he plays quarterback. He's shown he can do it at incredibly high levels. I got to give him the recognition he deserves. Someone who's shown he can do it at a high level, but in college, Caleb Williams, for me, is my quarterback 7 in Dynasty. He is an incredible prospect. Some inherent, of course, there's always this prospect fatigue, quote unquote. He's been good for so long. He was really good, truly his best season, arguably, in his true sophomore year when he had Jordan Addison. People get on him for maybe this past season. He does have to clean up, led the worst kind of fumble rate. Needs to secure the ball a little bit better, but it's very coachable. His mistakes are very coachable. What you can't coach is the pure talent, the gunslinger, the off-schedule type plays that he can make. And that's the name of the game. When we score, we're looking for players to put up points. There's so much big play potential with this guy. It's unbelievable. It is really unbelievable. Curious to see where he ends up landing, guys. I think it's going to be the Bears. I really do think it's going to be the Bears at the top. I don't see the Bears trading off that pick. I do see them trading off of Justin Fields because I do think we're going to see a change in coaching. I think Ryan Poles is just going to want his shot and his control to put his stamp on things. But enough about talk about an NFL team. Who rounds out the back end of this tier? Well, we're talking Justin Herbert, who, talking about cleaning house, Brandon Staley is finally gone. It can only hopefully get better for Herbert. He's been thrown to a first-round receiver in Quentin Johnston, who just a severe disappointment. I don't want to talk too down on anybody individually, but just not what you're looking for. But the beauty, somewhat silver lining, guys. So as we're done this 2023 season, 2024, the Chargers, they have an inside route to Malik Neighbors. And that is just the possibility that, and more than the likelihood, I believe they're going to get and go back to the receiver well. They shouldn't be discouraged just because Quentin Johnston didn't work out. The reality is with Justin Herbert, has he put the production out there consistently? Not necessarily, but he's such a talented guy and the upside is there. We talk about the 4 Ps. The production maybe is not the absolute highest, but we're talking about the QB, my QB 8 here. He ticks off the perception box really, like, I feel like no other, in a way that he's highly thought of for good reason. He's an incredible talent. It's just everything around him. He's only able to elevate, be the tide that rises boats that inherently just had holes poked into them. You know what I mean? He's gotten such a bad rap, not to his own fault, is my point. The perception is only going to improve to levels that it's been, I feel like, when he was lighting the world on fire in his rookie year. Talk about CJ Stroud's rookie year. Justin Herbert had quite the rookie year. And he's just simply, people see the talent that's in front and on the field. I got to have him as my QB 8. Still a very good option as really a quarterback 1 on your team. And so is in my book. Look, this is where I think I really jump off the ledge here a bit, guys. I've got Drake May, QB2 effectively of this 2024 upcoming rookie class. I just think it's funny. You have Justin Herbert kind of sandwiched between QB1, QB2 of this rookie class. Justin Herbert is pretty much the archetype, the example of what we hope Drake May is going to be and what I ultimately truly think he will be. He is an athletic guy. He can make all the throws. He pushes the ball downfield. Big play potential. Big play potential is the name of the game with Drake May. It's not the sexiest stat line. Look, like Caleb, a little bit of a down year in the 3rd draft eligible junior year, right? They were guns blazing in 2022. And what they've put out there is so good. They're incredible prospects. And Drake May, I really think he's transcendent in a way that I'm not worried if he goes to the Patriots. I'm really not. He's really my guy in a way. I think if there's a guy that's like CJ Stroud out of these quarterbacks in terms of the ability to maybe dominate from within the pocket, I think Drake May is the closest thing that aligns to that. Look, not needless to say, Caleb Williams has drawn the Pat Mahomes comparisons, Aaron Rodgers even in his quick release motion. These guys are 2 incredible rookie quarterbacks. They both represent my top 9 Dynasty quarterback rankings at this point in time, early 2024 offseason. I just think they're that special, guys. And we talk about value, insulation, liquidity, right? You don't want to pigeonhole yourself into certain situations. These guys are just incredible assets that you can have on your team. And really with this tier 2, it is still an incredible tier. And I want to make it clear too. Tier 2, it's such a tough exercise to make sense of a tier 1 and drawing a line at a tier 2. And look, you just got to venture out there. I kind of got at it We try to make sense of things in black and white, but the answer ultimately, how we make progress, is by taking risks and venturing out into the gray, right? Taking risks and picking a Drake May ahead of some other guys that we'll get into in tier 3. But nonetheless, just keep in mind this idea, some food for thought. I'll leave it almost as rhetorical questions. I think I'm clear in what I'm saying here, what I think the answer is, but we want to make things in tier lists. Is the difference between Josh Allen and CJ Stroud equal to the difference between Pat Mahomes and Drake May? Just some food for thought. But we all crave tiered rankings, which I totally get, and I embrace myself. Tier 3, it's pretty jumbled in tier 3. We've got a host of guys, some young, some old, and who kicks off the tier? Well, guys, look, I'm leaning old relatively. Dak Prescott has put on a show this year. He's put on a clinic, and we talk about production. I can't ignore it. I'm an Eagles fan. I'll check my bias right here at the door. I'm an Eagles fan. I'm a diehard Eagles fan. Dak Prescott, he gets a lot of stick, a lot of criticism, but he's putting up top 5 numbers, obviously Dynasty, fantasy output perspective. NFL, he's the MVP, leader in the clubhouse right now. He's putting up reliable, consistent numbers, and he's attached to CeeDee Lamb. And just an offense that is churning. You know Jerry Jones wants to score points. There's a certain peace of mind. Dak, he's 30 years old. Look, playing Dynasty, it's all about a long game, right? But realistically, tomorrow's not even promised. So you got to operate in rolling windows. You can't get further beyond a couple years at the most, right? Dak Prescott, you know he's going to be out there. He's got another contract, another big contract left in him. He's just put so much on the field. You got a certain peace of mind if you have Dak. That's just the reality. And I don't think this isn't a one-year wonder. He's shown he can put up numbers. And that's why I have him at the top of tier 3 here. Who's next to him? Guys, I'm going Jaden Daniels, my QB3 in the 2024 rookie class. Is this a hot take? Let me know how hot and spicy you think this is, but I really don't think it is. Jaden Daniels, he's comfortably a top 12 option, I think, for me, in this Dynasty quarterback landscape. You talk about, ultimately, you got to put points on the board. Jaden Daniels is as comparable to Lamar, I think, as we've seen in recent years. Talk about the guy next to him, ironically enough, with Anthony Richardson, the guy that is himself compared him in the pre-draft at the combine, Cam Jackson, right? Which he's an athletic freak. Absolutely total certified dude. But it's tough for me to put him higher than he is, higher than Jaden Daniels even, because he's out season-ending surgery. Ultimately, too, he's just not as refined as a passer in my book. I think the rushing upside is sort of indistinguishable between Jaden Daniels and Anthony Richardson. The rushing upside, it's just there for both of them. That's just the reality. If anything, I think Jaden Daniels, look, he's got gazelle. The guy moves like a gazelle. He's got this unbelievable top-end speed, really almost the 0 to 60, though. That quick, twitchy ability. But beyond that, obviously, these guys are throwing the football. They're quarterbacks. They're the leaders of the offense. I have Jaden Daniels as high as he is because, like I said, I just think he is closer to a Lamar than maybe Anthony Richardson is at this time. Talk about pushing the field, though, or pushing the ball deep down the field, similar to how the explosive Drake May and Caleb Williams, of course, have been. Jaden Daniels, guys, he dominated. He put those guys so far in the rear, everybody in the rear in college football with explosive plays, 20-plus yard plays. He was up there and in the, I think, give or take 90 big-time explosive plays. Who's below them? Well, the next closest guys, we're talking your Drake Mays, your Caleb Williams, the Michael Penix, the Bo Nix of the world in the 50, 60, maybe touching 70-ish range. Jaden Daniels is just an athletic freak, guys, who didn't even throw a pick on throws of 20 plus yards down the field. He led the entire college Division 1 in pushing them in throws down the field. And look, yes, he has Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Kyron Lacey, unbelievable weapons. But hey, so did Joe Burrow, and his numbers are right up there with what Joe Burrow put up. Totally different stylistically, don't get me wrong, but Jaden Daniels, guys, you got to brace for this. You got to brace for him being a top 10, top 15 at the lowest in my book, first round pick in the NFL draft. Who else can run the ball on the ground with some upside? It's Kyler Murray for me. He getting back into the swing of things. Part of my rationale, guys, for having him where he is because of the fact that I'm of the mindset he's going to get Marv. He's going to get Marvin Harrison Jr. And I know that's a lot. I'm making a lot of all this effort in general is fundamentally speculative, right? That's the name of this game. You got to be a little bit brave in your judgment and your assumptions. You can't just be behind the curve and just stand pat, right? Sit back. That's not my strategy. Let me make that clear. My process is very much being proactive, and that's what I am with these rankings to a very steep degree, you might say. But Kyler, got to have him. He's right on that door of a fringe top 12 dynasty quarterback. Quarterback one production. I think this guy, it's just only trending up for Kyler. And look, he's recovering. He's on the field from the ACL injury. He's going to be fully healthy, knock on wood, going into next season, 2024, with likely a new wide receiver one, potentially Marvin Harrison Jr. If not, he's going to get somebody. And if they don't get Marvin Harrison Jr., they probably get Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt, a franchise tackle to keep him healthy in the pocket, buy some time, maneuver like a roadrunner with his legs potentially. I just got to have Kyler where he is. Like I said, I favor the athletic, the absolute movers, right? I got to favor them in terms of the tiers. Who rounds out the tier 3? Well, we're talking Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Brock Purdy, guys that really are dominating from the pocket most of the time. And look, Trevor Lawrence with Doug Peterson, a guy I love, with some weapons. You know Doug wants to pass the ball. That's what the Jaguars are going to do. He's got a good running back, his Clemson teammate, ETN. Look, Trevor Lawrence, he's got the 4 Ps, perception, perspective, production, projection. They're all pretty high up there. Relatively boxes checked off, boxes ticked. But if I'm being real, I just prefer the guys ahead of him that I put in this tier because he just doesn't have quite that athletic upside. He's an athletic guy, don't get me wrong, but he's not going to be putting up potentially 800-yard rushing and 800 yards on the ground rushing season, right? He's going to get his fair share of quarterback sneaks, right? Sure. And he's going to scramble, of course. He's a good athlete, don't get me wrong. I just don't have him he's not quite at a Dak level, right? In terms of the production he's put on the field. Some things just remain to be seen, but don't get me wrong. Still think highly of him, as I do with Tua and Brock Purdy. Guys, it pains me. I know Brock Purdy, the perception, people don't like him. People say, oh, anybody can do what he's doing. That's such hyperbole, right? You got to give him some credit. Look, I don't necessarily have him as this MVP of the league, right? Like I said, I think I lean more towards Dak, the guy at the top of this tier 3 for me. But with Brock Purdy, he's just getting it done. And you got to honor this situation that he's in. The 49ers, everything's churning. Nothing's changing soon in the next year or two. That's just not what it's looking like. He's the guy right now in that offense, as Tua is in the Mike McDaniel offense, the Kyle Shanahan disciple. Two guys that are just surgical, getting the job done. And as much as people like to talk about advanced analytics, oh, well, it's all, they're not maybe pushing the ball as downfield as some other guys. Although, as we're recording this, look, Tua, he's got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, deep bombs. Bombs are plenty in that offense. But there's this perception of, oh, well, the average depth of target. Average depth of target, last time I checked, that's not a stat in your fantasy league, right? That's not the points. That's not points that are being put on the board. Touchdowns, yards are what's being put on the board. And Brock Purdy's doing that, and he will continue to do that in the 49ers offense. As much as it maybe pains me to say, I got to put him in this tier 3, guys. I got to put him in this tier 3. And again, as we move on to tier 4, I just want to emphasize this exercise is the difference in Josh Allen and CJ Stroud equal to the difference in CJ Stroud to Dak Prescott? Mahomes to May equal to May versus Purdy? These are the tough questions, right? And there's no empirical way of quantifying it. The model, it's all subjective, right? And I'm doing my best to give you guys my take on it, my spiel, forward-looking. All we can do is anticipate, be proactive, right? That's the theme. Everything's on a spectrum, right? It's not black and white. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the answer is somewhere in the gray. We got to make our own individual judgments. And ultimately, you can just take what I say at face value, or that I'm an absolute idiot who knows jack. But either way, it's information you can use to make your own decisions and judgments at the end of the day within your unique leagues, the context, how many people you got to start, Superflex, 2QB, even if it's not Superflex, who you're playing with, trade activity, inactivity. Keep it in mind, that's a qualifier that always has to be, regardless of what ranking or any video I'm put out there, right? So with that being said, tier 4, not a lot of guys here. The joint kind of smallest tier. And with this, the theme is, look, these are guys that are young and they're upside plays in my book, who could maybe fall a little bit down. There's always a chance, right? There's always a chance. Maybe not truly as value insulated as obviously the guys ahead of them. But with Jordan Love, Bryce Young, Justin Fields, these are guys that I'm cool betting on. I am more than cool taking a shot. If you're a rebuilder, absolutely guys that I would be interested in acquiring. Obviously not to the extent of shelling out a top 3 pick potentially in this 24 class when you got the likes of Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. But these are guys who I'm okay and I'm willing to bet on. I'm willing to bet on Jordan Love, Bryce Young, Justin Fields. With Jordan Love, I think he's bought himself time. He's bought himself at least a Daniel Jones-esque contract, right? An extension, if you will. And he has shown a lot these last couple weeks in the NFL. He's a solid quarterback for the Packers. And him, along with that entire offense and that weaponry, the young receivers, they're all growing together. And you have to just move forward with him. He's shown he's the guy. He has shown he's the guy in my book. Packers fans, any of you watching, let me know in the comments. Where are you at with Jordan Love? Panthers fans, where are you with Bryce Young? I know it seems like this guy's falling, especially with CJ Stroud, but with Bryce Young, guys, it can't get worse than how this rookie year has gone. It really can't. They are going to bring in a coach, again, tailor-made for Bryce Young, but it can't be worse than Frank Reich. And I'm a Frank Reich guy, but this whole season, it's just, and I'm not trying to be a Bryce Young apologist, but you have to remember what he put on the field at Alabama. And that's just what's my perception and the perspective I'm taking into account. He is a talented guy, and it's only going to go up for him in my book. It could not have gone any worse this rookie season. It really could not have. He's only going to get potential weapons, potential T. Higgins next year in free agency when they pick at the beginning of the second round. Look, it's going to be potentially receiver or O line. It's just such. I'm Bryce Young. Take a gamble on him, guys. Take a gamble on him. I am of that mindset. Call me crazy. Justin Fields, equally. I think, look, he has shown he can be a starter. A top, maybe not quite a top upper echelon guy, but with a new change of scenery, a new coaching staff, who's to say that's out of the realm of possibility? From a raw skills and talent, he's almost one of one. He's a bulkier Lamar. He's bulkier than Lamar. He's maybe even almost up there in Anthony Richardson stature. But he's an electric guy, and somebody's going to bet on him. I think it's not going to be with Chicago. Maybe it's with. I'd love to see him hometown, potentially with the Falcons. Change of scenery. No Arthur Smith. I think that's where this is trending. Maybe the Vikings, but I just have to put these guys in their own tier, in tier 4 here, because I'm willing to bet on them. The production, there for Love, there for Fields, maybe not Bryce Young. And I get that. I get that criticism. But you talk about the perception, the perspective with Bryce Young, the projection of him going into the NFL, why he was a number 1 overall pick. Don't forget that. That's just my spiel for tier 4 here. But tier 5, this is where it's so clustered, and really almost anything goes in this tier, but I got to start with youth. With Howell and Levis, I think, look, these are guys, and ultimately the theme of this tier is there's some peace of mind. We're talking about how you play Dynasty. There's peace of mind that these guys have bought themselves. These guys all are going to be starters in the league next year, in my view. They're going to be starters, and the reason that Levis and Howell occupy the top end of this tier is because, look, they could very well, in a couple weeks, depending on how the end of the NFL season goes, they could very well be into tier 4 for me. I'm always, again, my bias is going to lend itself toward people that you can project. Youth, relatively inexperienced guys in the NFL that aren't your Goff, Wilson, Stafford, Geno, Kirk, Rodgers. It's good in the sense, to me, this uncertainty, the potential that they could be more. They could. We don't know what they are, and there's an appeal in that. What they have shown is they've shown some progress. They've shown positives, and you got to put them, in my book, ahead of some other guys. Not to say that, look, sure things, you know what you're getting with Jared Goff. You know what you're getting with Jared Goff. Within that Lions offense, he's got them churning. But also, is Ben Johnson going to be there to call plays? I don't know. Maybe it looks a little bit different, right? It's basically at the peak of what it can be with this Lions team. And look, with the other guys in this tier, Russell Wilson, Stafford, Geno Smith. Again, it's tough for me. There's, in effect, some degree of contractual obligation and investment that gives me some peace of mind. Not a lot, not the most, some peace of mind that they're going to be contributors to your team, mid back end type QB2s possibly. And look, depending on the state of your team, that's just the game you might be playing. Older guys to fill in for you, depending on how you construct your team. Am I so confident with these guys rolling out? Maybe not. we're in the fifth tier, right? We're in the fifth tier anyway at this point. So that's, of course, important context at this rate. But look, they've shown they're veteran quarterbacks that can play at high levels. And that's especially what I'm banking on. Look, with Kirk, he was off to a great start this year. And Aaron Rodgers, what he's done before. The Achilles bros, if you will. Wishing them speedy recoveries. It's looking like Aaron Rodgers maybe he even returns this season, which is absurd. It's insane. It is crazy. Let me know honestly if you guys think he's going to return. It is crazy. It is crazy, absolute chaos to me. But look, I gotta honor him and Kirk in this tier because if they're out on the field, they're talented, real life, solid top half of the league, top 10 even at their best NFL quarterbacks, and I think they still have that to offer, right? I think that's still to offer for these guys. And ultimately the name of the game, guys, is there's 32 teams. There's going to be 32 starters week in, week out. I don't know if we're going to be getting a double pistol, triple, quadruple read option where we're having 3 quarterbacks on the field at once on one team, but I don't think those days are coming soon. But nonetheless, this tier 5, they're guys that can do a job for you. Quarterback 2, gonna have a starting job somewhere for next season and possibly very well the year after that. But ultimately, we can only really, I don't want to go too far beyond 2024, right? Although I am to some degree inherently with the rookies, right? But look, we know how reactionary the community can be. And the projection with these older guys, it's not going to go up insanity. What possible ceiling could they hit, right? That's why I have Howell and Levis as guys that can only, I feel, go up with what they put on the field, and at least to a time where into next year might be able to really capitalize and potentially sell high on these guys. Or if they're putting it out there, just good players to have on your team. But with tier 6 guys, we're getting into, rounding out a top 32. Excuse me. Rounding out a top 32, I got to just go with guys that I think are going to be starters, but at the top of this tier, because of just a lack of information, and it's so much speculative in nature, obviously, with these rankings, and I'm not comfortable putting them anywhere else. But with Bo Nix and Michael Penix, I'm big fans of them as quarterback 4, quarterback 5, relatively, in this upcoming draft class. I just don't know. I really don't know what the draft capital is going to look like for them if they're first round guys. And I lean Bo Nix potentially being a first round guy over Michael Penix. The medical red flags, season-ending injuries, a history of that. And if you're picking a franchise quarterback potentially in the first round, you want some degree of security, picking a guy that you think you can trust being out on the field. And I think that's more Bo Nix, but more so the mobility's there and really just doesn't lose you a game. And I think that's an underrated quality with Bo Nix. But although Michael Penix did beat him twice, so that's some. Who do you guys have between these two guys? I think it's so close, and again, I just can't speculate on where I think their draft capital might land because I'm not the GMs making the picks. It is so unclear at this stage making this video. I'd be doing a disservice if I had these guys solidly in a top of tier 4, right? I just can't, or end of tier. I can't do that. I think these guys, one of these two ends up being a first round pick. And depending on the situation, if they're both top 50 picks, Penix potentially being maybe a Will Levis team trades up into the top of the second round. I think you got to honor them as guys that have upside. And that's the game you got to play, right? You got to play the upside game. At least that's my opinion. I don't. What's the point in playing it safe, right? What's the fun in that? But to some degree, playing it safe. Look, I think Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett, and Baker Mayfield. Look, Baker, I don't fault you with these guys. With tier 5 and 6, it's especially murky for me. But Baker, to his credit, man, he's playing himself into a starting gig next year. Very, very likely, it looks like. And with Watson and Pickett, look, it's just kind of don't want to touch 10-foot pole. Keep a distance. Just talk about the perception. I mean, taking these guys arguably have just had such downward spirals. Even more than I'd argue with Bryce Young, because he's always going to have that number one pick label attached to him, right? With Kenny Pickett, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not confident. I'm not 100% confident, nor with Deshaun Watson. Who knows, man? Who knows what it looks like next year within their respective teams and offenses? Is Joe Flacco, is Joe Flacco elite? Dorian Thompson-Robinson with Kenny Pickett. Do the Steelers look to potentially take a Nix or a Michael Penix? That's a wrap for this first inaugural, more than initial, I guess we'll say, Dynasty quarterback rankings on the Dynasty Psych channel here, guys. Look, that's my top 32. Are there other guys that are interesting names, like your New York Giants, Patriots, players? Yes, maybe so. I don't know. It's just, those are who I have as my top 32 Dynasty quarterback rankings. I want to emphasize, too, what I've tried to make sense of doing this is apply a 4P production, projection, perception, perspective look into things and how I rank these guys. It's not a hard science in how I weight all of them. It's ultimately purely a subjective process. And what do I have to offer? Well, tune in for some future videos. I'll show off some of my teams, because ultimately, look, you want to be getting advice and some strategy from somebody that has some concept of maybe what they're doing or some degree of success, right? I get that. I totally understand it. I guess in this purely, ultimately, fundamentally unique to you and I, how we choose to run our Dynasty fantasy football teams, how I've approached this is my own quote-unquote model. But as a wise person, someone once told me, all models are wrong, some are useful. And that's the thinking I've tried to best apply here in this video. Let me know my absolute misses, what I maybe got absolutely right, if anything, according to you all, in the comments. We're on the road to 50, the 5-0. I think we're 5-0. Road to 50 by the end of 2023 as we launch into 2024, guys. I'm Colin. I'm out. Have a great end of the week, beginning of next week, Monday. Hopefully your teams are doing well. I wish you nothing but the best as we get through the Dynasty playoffs and look ahead, glass half full, always.